Sounds great. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining today. I'm very happy to have the chance to do this session as well as, many of all of the other ones that Ray mentioned. Today we'll be covering, before we do that, let me introduce myself. My name is Jessie Ransom, and I am the Teaching and Learning Products Specialist. For those of you who don't know me, I work with Leganto. I work very closely with the development team, and I also work with many of the libraries using Leganto. If I haven't worked with you directly, most likely I have talked to somebody else about you. I help support Leganto really from all aspects. What I always tell people is that I have a good understanding of both the technical aspects of what Leganto does, the different configuration options that are available, and also how it's used in real life. So how you can configure the system to do the types of things that you're trying to do. So today we are going to be focusing on the instructor experience. So what I plan to do is talk at a pretty high level about the value that Leganto brings to instructors. Some of this will likely be information that you already know, but I want to kind of use that to set the stage. From there, I'll be actually looking at some of the configuration options that are available and making some recommendations for things that you should turn on or should turn off or consider turning on or off within your Leganto settings. So that's what we'll be covering today. Please do put your questions in the chat at any point. Depending on what your question is, I will either answer it as we go or save it till the end, but don't feel like you need to wait till the end if something pops up as I'm talking. Feel free to put that in at any point. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. So I want to just start by saying how important it is to optimize the instructor experience. I know this is something that you already know, that many of you are already experiencing, every day as you work with Leganto. But we want to make sure that Leganto is easy for instructors to use, that they can log in, they can understand, what they should do, they can complete the main tasks that they need to complete, and that they overall have a positive experience with Leganto and get a lot of value out of it. Obviously, from there, we want them to continue using Leganto and this maybe I can't think of a better way to say this, but tell their friends. So promote Leganto to other instructors. We know that that is really the most meaningful way to sort of spread Leganto within an institution is once faculty start using it or instructors start using it and they really like it, and then they tell others about it. So that's what we want to kind of focus on in this session is how to do that, how to sort of simplify the process of working with Leganto and also give instructors the most value out of the system. Before we actually get into that, I want to talk a little bit about where I am coming from with this. We did a research study last year where we worked with instructors, both instructors using Leganto and those who did not use Leganto. You can see here there's a very broad mix of the different learning management systems that they were using and also the geography. So we talked to instructors all around the world about how they work with course materials, how they work with Leganto specifically or with reading lists specifically. And I know that many of you have also done your own user studies or instructor user studies. I will say if you haven't already done one, I encourage you to do so. Campus engagement can help you if you're not sure where to start with a user study. They have surveys that other schools have done that they can share with you. But this is really a great way to get feedback from your instructors on how they use Leganto. Like I'm saying here, what brings them most value, what they get out of the system. Some of you have also shared those user studies with us, and we definitely really appreciate that. We really rely on you to share instructor feedback with us. Obviously, we work with you and you work with them. So feel free to always pass on any feedback that you're getting from your instructors. I have throughout this presentation a couple of quotes, sort of why I'm, just to emphasize, why I'm making the recommendations that I'm making. So the quotes that I'm sharing specifically come from this ProQuest user study, but they're not I didn't find them to be especially surprising, so I don't know that you will find them to be especially surprising, but just a heads up that when I'm making these recommendations, they're based on conversations that we've had with instructors. They're based on the feedback that we've gotten from you or from other libraries about how their instructors use Leganto. So overall, just to summarize, instructors do like Leganto. I think this is a good thing to always keep in mind. But in terms of the main value that it brings to Leganto, it's quite different than the value that it brings to the library. I mean, not completely different, but most instructors are not especially motivated by the fact that it's easier for the library to get usage information about their materials. This is nice, but it's not necessarily a reason to use the tool from their perspective. So for the purpose of our session today, I want to really focus on the value that Leganto brings to instructors. And this is what we have heard in this user study and other studies as well, that it streamlines that collaboration with the library. Of course, we love to see that because that's one of the big goals from the library side. Lists are easy to reuse and share. Leganto keeps your resources organized, and it also connects students to the library. And I'll also add connect students to these resources as well, makes it easy for the students to access. This is a small list. It's not necessarily the only things that they like about Leganto, but I think it's important to kind of remember this high level value because one of the big things that I'm going to be focusing on this session today is simplifying Leganto. It is, as you already know, a complex product with a lot of features and a lot of options. And what matters the most is sort of this simple aspect of just keeping these resources organized, sharing them, working with the library. This is what really matters. So I will be recommending, for example, that you turn some things off in Leganto, and that's where that's coming from. Is we don't want to lose this high level value with Leganto. So summarizing some of the things that came out of the ProQuest user study, instructors do like Leganto. It's easy to use. They like the way that it looks. It's inviting, it's familiar. I like this one. I put in the title and the rest takes care of itself. So they do like Leganto. I think this is a really important one and also not surprising. People really like to just get in there and start working with it and play around and try to figure things out. Obviously, this isn't true for absolutely everybody, but this is what we kind of saw over and over again, that they like to just get in there and start using it. We had one person who said they went to a training session after 2 years because up until then they hadn't needed it, but they did find out at that point about some sort of what I think of as the bells and whistles, the extra things that you can do with Leganto, but it's really just kind of getting in there. The next thing, there's different types of users of Leganto. A few, I would say, who use it frequently. This quote here is a good one. I might decide the afternoon before to include something interesting. There are definitely instructors who get in there and add new resources every day or right before class or move some things around. But there's also a lot of instructors who don't, who work on their reading list once, over maybe a week-long period, and that's it, and they don't come back to it again. So we want Leganto to be, again, easy to use and simple to accommodate this, but to accommodate both of these different types of users. Okay, so now with that as sort of the intro, I will actually get into some of these recommendations. I do recognize that my recommendations won't be exactly right for everybody. You know your users better than I do. So assume as I'm talking that I know nothing about you as an individual library. These are sort of general recommendations or starting points. If there's something that is really important on within your campus, obviously don't listen to me. Do that instead. So these are sort of general recommendations. And overall, as I said, we want to streamline the system, streamline the workflows, accommodate instructors who don't use the system every day, who don't want to attend a training session before they start using Leganto, who maybe don't you don't need all of the additional options that are available. As we go through, I am going to be using all slides today. I debated with myself whether I should do like screen sharing and actually show Leganto or do slides, but I really wanted you to have the slides after the session. There's actually a few slides that you won't see today, but you will see in the version that we share out. I have some additional slides that have links to further documentation or videos where you can see more information, so additional details. But as I go through today, I'll mostly be talking. I didn't want you to feel like you have to be, taking a lot of notes as we're going. So there are slides that, show you how to do all the things that I am going to be talking about. The other thing I wanted to remind you of is that there is a feature in the product where you can very easily enable or disable, but I'll say for our purposes, mostly enable some of the things that I'm going to be talking about today. It doesn't cover everything, but up here in Leganto, for some users, there's a configuration or a little gear option here. And if you click on that, you can see some recommended features recommended by us for things that you should consider turning on. You don't have to get into the configuration menus to do this. You can just quickly toggle these things on and enable them. There's about, I don't know, 8 to 10 things in here that are recommendations. I won't be covering all of these things, and I'll cover some things that aren't included in this list, but I do want to remind you that these are based on sort of what I'm talking about today, really streamlining that experience, giving instructors the best features, disabling the things that are less helpful, that type of thing. So this is something, if you haven't taken a look at this or you haven't looked at it recently, you may want to take a look at those recommended features. It tends to be a good starting point, especially if you don't have a lot of time. So I just wanted to remind you of all of that. Okay, so now we'll actually sort of walk through, what it is like to be an instructor using Leganto. And to the extent that you can, I encourage you to do this as well. Walk through the tool, if you can, logged in as an instructor as opposed to logged in as a librarian. It is different. It's not significantly different, but librarians can see more things than instructors can see. You have more options available to you. Again, not significantly more, but there are some. So if you have the opportunity, I really recommend that you do this, that you log in, as an instructor and kind of walk through, or maybe log in with an instructor and walk through the workflow with them to see what it looks like for somebody who hasn't used Leganto before. And also, if you can, I recommend starting in the learning management system, assuming that this is where most instructors will start. That's where we're going to start today. So we're going to sort of do this. We're going to walk through the instructor workflow, and then along the way, I will be, pointing some things out that you can change or that you can customize and making some recommendations. So this is what we'll do, is walk through this instructor experience against our demo site here. I'm using Canvas. Obviously, it doesn't matter which learning management system you use, but just to help you orient if you're not familiar with Canvas, everything to the left of my mouse here is actually Canvas, and then above here is Canvas. But essentially what I want to get at here is, what is the starting point for your instructors? What do they click on? What do they need to do to get to Leganto? And this is something that you should look at. I know many of you already have done this, or you've made some decisions here. But what is the link called is an important aspect here. Is it something that will make sense to instructors? Is it something that will make sense to students too, when they come in here and they're looking for their course materials or they're looking for their reading list? We really recommend that you call it something like that. What it is, it's the course materials, it's the reading list, it's the resource list. Um, Thinking about how they're using Leganto and naming it appropriately. What else we recommend is that you don't call it Leganto, because nobody knows what that means. So if you see a link in your menu here that just says Leganto, that doesn't mean anything. You're maybe not inclined to just click on it just to see what it is. Whereas your reading list, if that's a term that your instructors are familiar with, obviously that's something that they'll know what it is. They'll be more inclined to click on it. So that's the first sort of entry point for instructors to take a look at. The second piece here is, does it work correctly? I debated whether or not I should put this in here, but I know that some of you are probably in implementation right now. So when you click on the link, it should take you to the right course. So this is one that we don't already have a reading list for it, but I can see the course code here matches the course code in Canvas. So that's the second question, is does it work? Does it take you to the correct course? You can also configure Leganto so that if the course doesn't exist already inside of Alma, Leganto will create it kind of behind the scenes. So the instructor, well, what we don't want is that the instructor hits a dead end. Once they've clicked on the link and decided to use Leganto, we want them to be successful. So you can have that course created in the background. Again, these are the types of things that are in the hidden slides, so you'll be able to see the details if you're not familiar with how to do this. The next thing to look at here is just, does it look okay? Does it, match the theme of the institution? For example, we could change the color to match the colors of the learning management system. You want this to be an integrated experience. If you do change the color, take a look also at the colors of other things. For example, if you were to make this white, then some of this would be very difficult to see. So those are things to look at as well as you're sort of doing your hypothetical walkthrough. The next thing to look at is, do you have enough room on the page to work with Leganto? Different learning management systems, embed the tool in different ways. Sometimes I'm going to sort of use my mouse. I hope you can see this. Sometimes the space, the real estate on this screen stops right here, for example. So in that case, we have only a very limited amount of space to actually work with Leganto. This is something that you can customize. I have the arrow here indicating that you can customize the height, but that's something to take a look at. Generally, we recommend that Leganto be embedded as you see it here, really keeping it integrated with the learning management system, making it really a part of the course from the instructor perspective, obviously from the student perspective as well. I will say that doesn't always work. There are certain learning management systems where it just doesn't work well to have it embedded, for whatever reason, there just isn't enough room. You certainly want it to be usable. So if when you embed it in the learning management system, it doesn't have enough room to actually make it useful, then I would encourage you to pop it out and have it open in a new tab. But again, these are the things that when you work with when you kind of walk through your system, you'll be able to see that right away and understand if you can work with Leganto or if you need to open it in a new tab. It is also nice just to be aware that up here at the top, there's the option to open Leganto in a new tab. Sometimes what we have embedded is the perfect experience for students, but instructors, as they're building their lists, might need a little bit more room or might prefer a little bit more room. So I always like to point that out just as an option, just in case some people like to use it. So that's there as well. The next thing that you may want to customize are the options that display on this landing page. So what we're seeing now is the screen when there isn't already a reading list. So I have the option to create a reading list from scratch. It didn't actually show up on my screenshot here, but what I really wanted to focus on are the other two options that can potentially display below this one. So the second one here is the option to upload a document that contains a reading list. What this does is it sends the file to the library, and then the idea is that the library builds the reading list. But if that's not something that your library does, then you probably don't want to have this option available. So you can hide that option. The other option that would display below is the option to roll over a previous list. Again, if you are doing a bulk rollover or you're doing resets of reading lists instead of rollover, then you wouldn't want to do that. So here, make sure that the options that display actually align with how you're telling instructors to use the system. If you're telling them, you click on this button and just ignore the other things that display on the screen, then just remove the other things that display on the screen so that they're not wondering what it does or wasting time looking at something that isn't relevant. The last thing here that I want to talk about on this screen is just the text on the screen. You should be aware that you can change all of this text. I have actually here an example of what you can do with this. You can change any of the text within Leganto overall, but definitely here on this main page, you can change any of this text. So it's all done in the Leganto labels table, and each of these pieces of text is a distinct label. So you do need to find the right one. I have just an example here that kind of shows you what I mean when I say each of the pieces of the text is a distinct label. What I usually recommend is that you just search for the text that you're trying to change, and then that'll give you the right label. And you can usually check that it is in fact the right label by looking. This is the label, I can't remember what it's called, the label name or the label description or something like that. So they all start with welcome in this case. So you can usually check and make sure that it seems like the right thing. And also you'll see your changes right away. So if we were to say, welcome to your course materials, if I wanted to change this to welcome to your reading list tool, I can change that label, hit save, and then come back and refresh it, and I'll see those changes right away. So you'll be able to check this and make sure that you're changing the right label. But this is probably something that you want to at least kind of look at and see the text, because this is, really the first thing that instructors, let me go back to this page. This is really the first thing that they see. So, this is an opportunity to maybe align this with the way that you're promoting Leganto, with language that maybe makes the most sense. If you want to have, I don't know, instead of upload a document containing an existing reading list, you want to change this to something like, for example, your syllabus. You can change all of this language to just give a little bit more information or slightly different information to align with how your institution is using Leganto. I would recommend taking a look at this page, especially this welcome page, as the first piece of information that instructors see. Keep in mind as you're doing that the goal is to keep this simple. So I don't necessarily recommend, a long list of all of the things that you potentially could do with Leganto. Really focus on that high level. And for that, we can go back again to what we heard from instructors. That it's easy to organize resources, that it's easy to share them with students, that it's easy to reuse your lists. Again, focusing on just those very high level values that Leganto brings. Okay, just keeping an eye on the chat here. So far, I'm not seeing any questions. I'm hoping that you're all still with me. Let's go on. So, yes, my favorite thing to talk about is the onboarding. I mentioned that this screen is the first screen that your instructors will see when they come to Leganto. We do have the option to display the help screen right up front when the instructor or when the user logs in right away. I really recommend that you don't do this because, here's my recommendation to turn it off, because very few people are inclined to read 4 pages of text about a tool that they've never used before. You can see here that this goes through 4 pages of text. So I don't think that this is the best starting point with Leganto. I don't think this is putting your best foot forward, if you will, with Leganto. Most people skip this, and then they come back later and they can't remember, like they realize they should have read it because then they have a question. So I recommend turning this wizard off. I don't think that this is a good place to show first, or a good thing to show first. I will tell you, we have some new onboarding coming with Leganto. It's currently scheduled for January. So it'll be a new set of screens that are designed to just portray sort of the general concepts behind Leganto. I have a couple of examples here. I know I showed these at Igloo, so some of you have seen them, but I know many of you probably haven't. This is the first one. So they're GIFs, and they walk through just sort of the basic ideas. There'll be a little bit of text on the screen, and you'll be able to customize that text. But for the most part, the idea is just to give the sort of general idea of what Leganto does. So for this one, the general idea is that Leganto is a tool where you can pull resources from the library, from the web, from your computer. You can organize those resources into a list. So that's what we're doing with the onboarding moving forward is, rather than a lot of text and what is really help documentation, we want to focus on just the general idea of what Leganto is, some of the main things that you need to know about it so that you can get in there and start playing with it. The last one in this onboarding wizard is this one that is basically when you have questions, there's help within the product. So where to go when you have questions. This is how most people use Leganto. It's how most people use any new technology. You sort of get in there, you start playing. When you have a question, you know, you have your sort of point of need help. So this is what we'll be doing for the onboarding. I want you all to be aware of that, that this is something that's coming. So now actually we are in Leganto as part of our sort of walkthrough here. So the next thing that the instructor sees is the templates. They see this screen even if you don't have any templates. In this case, they only see the default. I think I might have customized the language of the default here. They see something like this. We do recommend that you create templates. There's a link here to a page on our Knowledge Center that has some suggestions for the types of templates to create or the way to do this. This really can save instructors a lot of time. You won't hit everything. You won't be able to capture all of the ways that reading lists or resource lists are organized, but something like a weekly template, for example, this will hit a significant number of your instructors, most likely. I know, as I said, my recommendations aren't true for everyone, but it takes a lot of time to create 12 sections in Leganto. So something like this, or if your term is even longer, something like that really can make a big difference in terms of the workflow. This template here is very simple. It's just week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4, and so on. So we recommend a couple of templates weekly for however long your terms are. Maybe something like this, essential recommended further reading. Usually, those two are the biggest ones, but there's some recommendations in here for other ones. You also can pull analytics. The section name is something that's in analytics, so you can potentially pull a report of all of the section names. And this might also give you an idea of what instructors are doing, what they're naming their templates kind of overall. Are there common themes? Are there things that, maybe lots of people do have a section called, I don't know, core materials. So that might be good to know that that would be a good template to create. Obviously, you can also talk to your instructors and get an idea of what they're doing, or look at some of the reading lists to see what people are doing and what would be helpful. I don't recommend a very long list of templates. Again, we don't want it to be so much that it's then confusing, but a couple of templates with good descriptions, so we know what's going to happen with this template. A couple of templates really can have a big impact on the instructor experience. So now we go into Leganto. We have our list that we're creating. Let's say that my template wasn't exactly right and I need to add a section. There is a configuration option that is whether the new section should be added at the end of the list or the beginning of the list. If you don't already have this setting, I very, very, very strongly recommend it, that the new section should be added at the end of the list. We actually almost went in and changed this for everybody, but there were still a number of libraries who had the new section added at the front. So we were kind of hesitant, or the top, we were sort of hesitant to just make this blanket change for a significant number of customers. But I really, really strongly recommend this. As you're building a list, if you think about you're building week 1, week 2, week 3, it's not likely you're going to start with week 12 and work your way up. So it really makes the most sense to have the new section added to the end of the list. I'm going to pause for a minute here, and I should have probably said this at the beginning, but the way that the configurations work for Leganto is that, I know many of you know this, but we add things over time. We add new options over time. It's often at customer requests. I suspect this may have been added, fairly early in Leganto. It's from before I was working with Leganto, but we add in these new options. And generally speaking, when we add new functionality, the default setting is whatever it previously was, because we don't want to be making changes to, all of your Legantos in the middle of the term, or really, for most people, we want you to be able to make those decisions. But what that means is that, if you're not going in on a regular basis and making these changes, then you don't have the sort of recommended settings for Leganto. So now this is actually the default for newer libraries using Leganto, but for people who've been using it for longer, it isn't. So I just wanted to mention that. I know that you're already aware of that, but that's something to be aware of. We did go in 2020 and kind of reset all of the defaults. So for schools who went live after about I don't know, July or August of 2020, you do have a lot of these recommended settings that I'm talking about today. Schools that have been using Leganto for longer, you don't unless you've gone in and actually changed them. I meant to say that at the beginning about those new default settings, but I forgot. So this was my reminder. I think I'm going to pause for a minute here. This is sort of we've kind of walked through the first steps of getting in through the learning management system, coming to a Leganto for the very first time, starting to build a reading list from scratch. I'm just going to pause and see. I don't see anything in the chat. Any questions? Ray, have I missed any?
Nope, nothing's come in yet.
Okay. All right, so now I'm going to talk about what to do next with your Leganto or with your walkthrough. So my next recommendation is to remove some stuff. And I want to start by just acknowledging that, we at Ex Libris, we do put a lot of effort and thought into developing the features and the options that we have with Leganto. As I said, a lot of times what we develop is at customer requests. Where we get a request for an additional option, something that you want to hide, something that you want to show, whatever it may be. So I don't necessarily take this lightly, the idea of removing things from Leganto, turning certain features off. But it is something, not every feature, not every option is right for every single library. So I'm going to point out some of the bigger things that I would recommend that you take a look at. So now we're actually in Leganto. I'm in I'm in a actually just a demo site here. The screenshot is just from a demo site, but I'll point out a few things that I usually recommend if I kind of get a glimpse into somebody's Leganto. The first one here is the list advisor. Some of you are using this, some of you are not using this. It's a way to make some recommendations to instructors on things that they can do to strengthen their reading list. The out-of-the-box recommendations are things like add tags to resources or add sections, add descriptions, things that really do help contribute to student engagement, options for organizing the reading list, things like that. So the way the list advisor works, in case you're not familiar, is that as I do those things, as I add tags or descriptions, it changes my score. It adds the score up. I can take a look at the make this list better option and it'll give me some ideas for things to do. I generally recommend turning this off unless, unless you're using it today and you know that this is something that your instructors like. I generally recommend turning it off because it's, again, one thing that it's not essential. It is a nice way to let instructors know what they can do with Leganto, some of these additional options for things that they can do. Although we've done some work in the past several years to sort of clarify, some of the labels on the screen, for example, to make those options more prominent. But it is a nice way to let them know what they can do. But it also has the potential to be confusing. So, if I'm coming to Leganto for the first time, I don't know what this is, and I don't know what it means. I don't know the impact of, my score. What does 61% mean? Does that mean my students can't see it? So this is something that I usually recommend turning off. Again, unless this is something that you're really promoting, maybe you've done some work to kind of change the labels, or you include this in materials. But across customers that I work with, this is usually what I recommend is disabling the list advisor. This tip of the day also, if you enable the list advisor, this is the second option, is to display the tip of the day. Again, it's usually not critical information, so this is something I also would recommend disabling. If you don't have the list advisor, you also don't have the tip of the day, though, just so you know. The next thing to take a look at here is the two options for the library review and the publish. I know that some of you have spent quite a lot of time, thinking about what to do here. I actually, again, not in the slide that you see here, but, oh wait, look, I have a little quote. I just saw my next slide. I have a little quote here. So this came from our survey. One thing I forget to do all the time is send the list. I last sent it in May. I should have been sending it in the meantime. There are some configuration options that are available that can really help with this process of, do I publish something? Do I send it for library review? When do I do what? What's the difference? We have a page on the Knowledge Center that is in the best practices and how-to sections for Leganto that talks about this. This is one where I think a blanket recommendation doesn't necessarily work for everybody. But as an example, you can configure the system so that when the instructor publishes the list, it automatically sends it for library review. And when they add new resources to a list which has previously been sent, it also will automatically send those resources to the library. So if if this is feedback that you're getting from your instructors that they don't remember to do one of these things, I would recommend getting this to the point where they only have one option. I think publish is the best option, or you can even change the language of this, publish to students or something like that if you want to. But I think publish is the best option because that tends to be the one that's the most meaningful for instructors. Again, this isn't true for every institution around the world, but generally speaking, globally, it is more important for the instructor that their student can see it than it is that the library can see it. So it means more to publish the list to students. So that's the button that I would recommend if you're going to change these options here, that they publish it and then behind the scenes, configure it so that it also sends those lists to you. Again, I know that this isn't the right fit for everybody. I know that there are institutions where the library or where instructors are much more accustomed to working with the library around their course materials. And in that case, they would be looking for a library review option. But this is something to at least consider for your institution, for your configurations, is what makes the most sense for your instructors, for the way that they are accustomed to working with the library, the way that they're accustomed to sharing these resources with students. This is something to think about. I'm not going to go into all of my kind of pros and cons of the different options today, but I will just remind you that there's a page on the Knowledge Center. The slides will include a link to it where you can see those kind of pros and cons if you're not sure what will work best for you. We do have a document that can help you sort of think through that question. And then the last thing that I recommend you do is take a look at the menu options. There's a list menu, a section menu, and a citation menu. I think this is the whole thing. I logged in, I turned everything on, I logged in as an instructor and took some screenshots. So you can see that there's a lot of options here. And these may not all be necessary. So I would recommend that you take a look at the options that are in your various menus and really think critically about which ones you need to have and which ones are sort of nice to have or like bonus features. If it is not likely to be used, I would recommend turning it off as opposed to leaving it on just in case somebody wants it. If you reach those just in case scenarios, your instructors will ask you, or they'll say, I wish it could do this. That's the benefit of having a user study, is you can get that kind of feedback about what maybe you didn't think they would use that it turns out they would. I have on here some recommendations, again, kind of general recommendations for things that you can consider turning off. Same as before, I know this won't be the right fit for everybody, but just as an example, the list menu, this order citations in all sections, I sort of had a hard time with this one. What this does is it takes all of the citations in your list and it lets you order them alphabetically. There's no undo button for this. But if you know that your professors, your instructors prefer to have them alphabetically, or this is a very common thing that, a common way to organize their resources as opposed to weekly. Obviously, in that case, I wouldn't recommend turning it off. But generally, if lists are organized by week or by date, this is not as helpful, this option to reorder the citations. LTI direct access, there's other options for how Leganto links up with the learning management system. So that's why I have that one off. The printing option is very, very similar to the exporting option. So that's why I have that off. Display list changes, again, this might be more useful, but these are sort of general recommendations, again, for things to sort of think about. It may be that you keep these options. It may be that this isn't the right fit for you. You get rid of some other options. But if you're not sure where to start, I have this in here as kind of a things to take a critical look at in the settings. So now that we've disabled some things, I want to highlight some things that you should enable if you haven't already. And here we're really focusing on the value that Leganto brings to instructors. And I want to remind you here that the value it brings to instructors is not the same as the value that it brings to the library. So as you're thinking about these features, really think about it from that perspective, from the perspective of the instructor. How are they using Leganto? What do they need? That's the way to consider these features. The first sort of area to talk about is the help. There are several options, newer in the last, I don't know, year or so, year and a half maybe. There's some newer options for help, sharing help. We have added in some kind of point of need help. As I mentioned before, people don't like to read a lot of documentation or read the help before they actually use Leganto, but they do want help when they need it. So there's some new options. The guided videos, you can enable their videos that walk through sort of the main tasks that an instructor needs to perform when they're in Leganto. Adding resources from the library, as an example, is one of the videos. You can use our out-of-the-box videos, or you can create your own videos, or if you already have videos, you can link to your own videos with this guided videos. We also have the guided tours, which walk you through the specific steps. So if I say I want to upload a file, then it pops up with guides for what to click on, and it's contextual. So it looks at which screen I'm currently on and then tells me what to click on next. Maybe I need to close something before I can get started. So the guided tours are really nice. Again, focusing on these sort of key things that the instructor needs to do with Leganto, walking them through how to do it. So if you haven't enabled those, especially the guided tours, I really do recommend that. You can enable specific ones or disable specific ones. So if there's certain things that you don't really use or encourage instructors to use, uploaded files is a good example. You can just turn that one off, but still keep the other ones. So we're really focusing on this moving forward, this idea of the point of need help. I get in, I start using Leganto, and then I have a question. So then I go to the help to get the answer to my question. The other thing you can do now is, rather than having the help link in Leganto link to our help, it can link to your help. So if you've created end user help, again, maybe that focuses more on how you want instructors to use Leganto, or maybe you want to talk about how specific tags are meant to be used or things like that, you can link to your help. And you can have separate help. I've said help like 90 times. You can have separate help for instructors versus students. So they'll see the appropriate, they'll see help, but it'll take them to the appropriate link. So if you haven't changed that, if you have help already, your own help, and you haven't changed the link, this is definitely something that you should do in Leganto. The last thing that's on here is really just a reminder that Leganto now has the general message, and this is a way to just put a message on, right when you log into Leganto, it displays above the citations. So if you have important information that you need to share. If you have, I'm really harping on my survey. If you have your survey that you want faculty to take, maybe it's now time to start building lists and you want them to know the deadline. You can create a general message that displays, and you can have it display to specific types of users. So you could say, we want our instructors to click on the survey or know the due dates for their lists or whatever it may be. So this is a way to communicate with your instructors. We really see this as the general message as something that is only up for a short period of time. If it's there all the time, you start to ignore it. But it's a great way to share that information with your actual users. The next thing, which I think probably most of you have enabled at this point, is the list analysis. These are the analytics that instructors can see about how students are using their reading lists. So if you haven't enabled this, you definitely should. This is a big benefit to instructors. They have access to this information about how their students are engaging with their course materials. So this is definitely something to enable. I did also want to talk about the student success measurements. This is the option to have the unanonymized user information, which students are using which resources, in other words. I'm not going to make a blanket recommendation that you turn this on because I know that this is a really sensitive topic, but I will say that this tends to be information that instructors want. Which students are using which of their course materials. Also, depending on your institution, and also where you are geographically, I'll acknowledge that. It also tends to be information that they can get from other teaching and learning tools, maybe from the learning management system, or maybe from other tools that they're using throughout their course. So consider this. Consider whether the student success measurements brings enough value to instructors that you should enable it. Certainly, you can talk to, if you have a privacy officer on your campus, you can talk to them about this. But this is something that we do tend to get good feedback from instructors on. They like being able to see the information about which students are engaging with which resources. So as we're talking about this, instructor experience, I did want to mention that. I feel like I'm being a little cagey because I am very aware of the privacy implications related to this, but it is definitely something that can impact the instructors and sort of how the value that they get out of Leganto. Okay. I only have a little bit about the student. I really did want to focus on the instructor experience, but I will say how students use Leganto or how they work with Leganto does impact the instructor experience. If students find it easy to use and they don't struggle to access the resources, it's ultimately less work for instructors. So there's just two things that I'm flagging here that you should take a look at. The first one is the option to have your links view online as opposed to check availability. This is another option that came out many years ago that I know not everybody has changed, but I generally do recommend this. The difference is that when I click on view online, it takes me directly to the resource, whereas if you have it displaying check availability, it opens up the full view of the citation where I can select from the list of links that are available. I usually recommend that you have the view online option, which takes you to the first link, the first non-hidden link. It's one less click for students. It's easier for students to get to these resources. That's ultimately what it comes down to. Students don't tend to care that there are 3 different providers for this resource and I can select one of them. They just want to read whatever it is that they have to read for their course. So this is usually my recommendation for this setting. And then the other one that can really help with students is to enable the broken link reporting. I know that many of you also already have this one, but this is the option for students to mark a link as broken, and that feeds into a task for the library to take a look at that. But this is a really great way to get that feedback from students, potentially instructors as well. But again, to get that feedback about what's working and what isn't working. As I said before, if students are having trouble accessing their resources, that's definitely going to impact the instructor experience. All right, and then last but not least, I do want to talk about the newer features that are now available with Leganto, the social reading and the read and respond assignments. Just so you know, these two links here take you to the instructor facing videos or potential instructor facing videos about these two features. So if you're not sure what I'm talking about, I definitely recommend watching those. Social reading is the option to have collaborative annotations on course materials, and then read and respond assignments is the option to actually assign Leganto resources as an assignment in the learning management system. Here's a quote that came from the ProQuest user survey. It's an ongoing problem to get students to really do all the readings they're required to do. So this is a way to do that, which again can really help with the instructor experience, giving them more value out of Leganto. Both of these features really do help with active learning, getting students more engaged with their course materials. Reading is something that they do by themselves, and you hope that they do it, you hope that they understand it. So this is a way to get the student more engaged with their reading, give them the opportunity to add comments, ask questions, collaborate with their peers. Encourage that interaction in the classroom, again, around their course materials, and then also for the instructor to understand whether students are learning the content. Are they getting out of it what they should be? Are they asking a lot of questions? Are they, adding comments that indicate that they get it or that they don't get it? So this is also a great tool for instructors as well. Again, this is, of course, on top of all of the other things that Leganto already does, but these active learning features are included in your Leganto subscription. And again, they bring a lot of value to your instructors. So this is also something to be aware of and enable or talk about with your instructors so that they're getting the most value out of Leganto. This is just a couple of quotes from Michael Wilder, who works in the Office of the Center for Teaching and Learning at the University of St. Thomas. A huge improvement over the static syllabus, because with social reading, students are engaged not only with the content, but with each other, and it increases accountability among students. So again, when we're talking about getting the most value out of Leganto, this is really a huge benefit to instructors, that they can use Leganto for all the things that they've always been able to do, organizing their course materials, building that connection with the library, easily reusing these lists from year over year, but also get this active learning functionality out of the same tool. So that's really it. You've been a quiet group. I know you can't talk, but a quiet group in the chat as well. Again, we'll share these slides with you after the fact. So there's a couple of additional links in here to just some pages that you should be aware of. I want to also remind you that your campus engagement manager is there to help you. This session really covered sort of the technical sides, things to turn on, things to turn off, ways to look at the instructor experience. Your campus engagement manager is there to help with kind of the social adoption of Leganto, how to talk to instructors about Leganto, how to reach new instructors, how to maybe leverage some of the big initiatives that are happening on your campus to promote Leganto. So they'll definitely be able to share some resources with you. That's a really great asset with Leganto, is that you have your campus engagement manager. If you're not sure what to do with your, how to contact your campus engagement manager, feel free to reach out to me and I can connect you. I'll just say it's now time for questions, but I'm going to leave my email address up on the screen while we do questions. So if you don't have it, now you do. Feel free to reach out to me at any point with any questions that you have related to what we covered today, of course, but also anything else. I'm always happy to have the chance to talk to you, to all of you, about how you're using Leganto, what you're trying to do, what your workflows are, those types of things. I think with that, I will actually stop talking because now we have less time for questions. So any questions?
I haven't seen anything come through, so just a reminder, if you do want to submit a question, do that over in the chat box and make sure you select all panelists. And while we take just one more minute to see if anybody else does have a question, I just want to remind you that a survey is going to pop up as soon as you leave today's session. And we really appreciate any feedback that you have to share with us, ways that we can improve, other topics you'd like to see us cover. We really listen to all the feedback we get and build our training based around that. That being said, I'm still not seeing any questions come in, Jessie, so I think we might be good to just go ahead and call it a day.
All right, I'm sure nobody will be sad to have a meeting that ends early. Oh, here we go. How do you add the publish button next to the library review button rather than having to select it from the drop down? This is excellent. This is one of the configuration options. I know that what I showed you in the slides doesn't actually have all, it had like 2 or 3 actual configuration places, but the slides that we're going to share do include more links to documentation or different resources. A lot of what I've shared today is actually in this, I'm in the Knowledge Center in Leganto. There's a best practices and how-tos section. So a lot of what I shared today is in the page about integrating with the learning management system, and then also over here, the customizing the instructor and student experience. Not everything, but a lot of it is in here. So here is this best practice toolkit. I'm going to just put this link in the chat as sort of a general place to start. It kind of compiles together, you know, details about the publishing options, ways to you know, do different things. But I think this also talks about, yes, here it is. This talks about how to configure some of these buttons. So I'm going to put this in here. There's a setting though, specifically, I think it's in the features table, that's something like publish as button. Let's just see here. Set publish as button. Yes, here, this is the actual parameter. So you would set this to true actually. If you wanted to have the button display. So I'll put that in the chat too. But this link will give you, this is what I was saying, there's sort of pros and cons to different options. So this will give you those pros and cons. You can see I'm very excited to have a question. All right.
Yeah, I think that's, but thank you. Thank you for giving us that one good question. We appreciate it. All right, Jessie, well, thank you so much for this presentation. We really appreciate it. Again, we hope to see you all at the remaining webinars in this series. Otherwise, you'll be getting an email before end of business tomorrow with this PowerPoint presentation and recording. Everybody have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.